September 30th, 2025. Nearly every U.S. general and admiral is called to a single auditorium. Suddenly, President Trump goes on record. "If I don't like somebody, I'm going to fire them right on the spot." In one move, the leadership of the world's largest military, 809 top officers overseeing 2 million troops, faces an ultimatum that has no precedent in American history. What happens if the U.S. loses its generals, not in war, but in a single day of political confrontation? The shockwave might not start on the battlefield, but in the fragile decisions that control it. Just how quickly could command unravel, and who pays the price when the chain breaks? Cameras flashed as nearly 800 uniforms filled the Quantico Auditorium, a sea of medals and stars pressed into rows under fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the kind of tension you can't train for. 1 part discipline, 2 parts disbelief. On stage, President Trump delivered his line without a stutter. "If I don't like somebody, I'm going to fire them right on the spot." The words hit like a hammer, echoing across the ranks of leaders used to measured orders, not public threats. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth followed, calling out what he called the failures of past commanders, warning that anyone unwilling to fall in line should step aside. Journalists in the back scribbled furiously, headlines forming before the speeches even ended. For decades, the U.S. military's highest code has been apolitical service. Officers serve the Constitution, not a party or a president. But in that room, the line blurred. Loyalty tests replaced quiet professionalism. The press called it a historic breach, a public spectacle that left even the most seasoned generals staring straight ahead, faces unreadable. The message was clear. Dissent would cost you your career. For a force built on chain of command and mutual trust, the shock wasn't in the threat itself. It was in watching the rules change, live, with the whole world watching. The U.S. military's upper ranks are a numbers game with almost no slack. At last count, 809 generals and admirals wear active duty stars, every one of them authorized under a statutory ceiling that stops at 857. That margin, less than 50 billets wide, is the thinnest buffer in modern American history. Every slot represents a command, a combatant theater, a service chief, a joint task force, or a specialized force with global reach. Lose a handful, and deputies step up. Lose dozens, and the chart turns red. Acting officers everywhere, authority diluted, decisions delayed. The system is designed for steady turnover, not a sudden purge. These leaders sit atop a force of over 1.31 million active duty troops and nearly 800,000 Guard and Reserve. That's a city-sized workforce, all waiting on orders that flow from a handful of Senate-confirmed posts. Each 4-star billet, each major command, is locked behind a nomination and a Senate vote. In a crisis, the process grinds. Weeks for hearings, more for floor action. No shortcut exists for experience or trust. The chain of command is only as strong as its weakest confirmed link. Every gap at the top ripples outward, slowing deployments, muddling joint operations, and leaving allies guessing who's in charge. The structure is massive, but its leadership margin is razor thin, by law, by design, and by the cold math of confirmation politics. American history offers a handful of moments when the firing or forced resignation of top officials sent shockwaves far beyond the Pentagon. In April 1951, President Truman relieved General Douglas MacArthur, commander of United Nations forces in Korea, after MacArthur publicly challenged White House policy. The decision was legal, swift, and absolute, but the fallout was anything but contained. Congressional hearings stretched for weeks. Polls showed most Americans sided with MacArthur, not the president. The Army fielded angry letters from veterans and families. On the ground, U.S. and Allied troops in Korea faced a sudden vacuum at the top, with orders and strategy paused mid-conflict while new leadership took the reins. For all the talk of civilian control, the price was confusion, shaken morale, and a public that questioned who really held the reins in war. Fast forward to October 1973. President Nixon, desperate to halt the Watergate investigation, ordered the firing of Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. His Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General both refused and resigned in protest. The so-called Saturday Night Massacre triggered a chain reaction. Justice Department leadership gutted overnight. Congress launching emergency hearings, and a flood of public outrage. The Justice Department limped through the crisis, its authority battered, its staff demoralized. Each of these episodes involved only a handful of leaders, yet the consequences rippled across government and society. The American system survived, but not unchanged. Even limited purges tested the balance between authority and accountability, and exposed just how fragile trust can be when the highest ranks are swept away in a single night. Stalin's Red Army in 1937 was an engine of ambition, until it wasn't. In less than 2 years, 3 out of 5 marshals vanished from the ranks, swept away by show trials and secret orders. 13 of 15 army commanders gone. Over 150 division leaders erased. The Soviet officer corps, hollowed out on the eve of World War II, stumbled into disaster. German armies rolled east, finding Soviet units led by men promoted for loyalty, not skill. The price was measured in millions of casualties and lost ground, mistakes that echoed all the way to Moscow's outskirts. Turkey's night of tanks and jets in July 2016 ended with a different kind of purge. President Erdogan, still standing after a failed coup, ordered the removal of more than 3,000 officers, general staff, pilots, NATO liaisons, whole command layers cut out in a matter of weeks. The aftershocks reached alliance headquarters. Joint missions faltered. NATO planners scrambled to fill gaps, watching as Turkish readiness slipped and trust inside the alliance thinned to a thread. Russia's war in Ukraine offers a modern playbook for command chaos. Since 2022, generals have been fired, reassigned, or disappeared in a blur, sometimes mid-offensive, sometimes after a single failed assault. The result? Fractured orders, units left waiting for direction, and a military that cycles through leaders faster than it finds victories. Each of these cases, different in cause, share one outcome. When generals vanish, armies lose their edge. Operational confusion, alliance strain, and adversary boldness follow in their wake. The lesson is simple. No force, no matter how vast, is immune to the cost of decapitating its own command. The phone rings in a combatant command headquarters. Nobody at the top to answer. Deputy commanders, most wearing 3 stars instead of 4, scramble to fill the vacuum. Orders that once moved in minutes now sit in limbo, stamped acting and waiting for a signature. Deployment schedules slip. Airlift missions stack up on the runway, waiting for green lights that never come. Maintenance crews hold jets and ships in the hangar, unsure when or if the next sortie will launch. Munitions requests pile up, stuck behind unanswered emails and missing approvals. Every delay ripples outward. Training rotations postponed. Overseas units left on standby. Allies pinging for updates and getting silence. The system is built for continuity, but not for this many empty seats at once. In the first weeks, confusion becomes routine. The only certainty is uncertainty. Across NATO headquarters, the mood turned from routine vigilance to something closer to strategic unease. 32 member states, nearly 950 million people, all watching the Quantico spectacle and recalculating the odds. In Brussels, alliance chiefs traded encrypted messages, weighing how much autonomy their rapid reaction forces might need if Washington's chain of command snapped under pressure. No formal contingency plan surfaced, but the quiet consultations multiplied. Analysts flagged the risk. In a moment when unity is currency, even the rumor of American indecision can drive partners to hedge their bets. Meanwhile, defense ministries in Moscow and Beijing monitored the headlines, looking for hesitation in U.S. signals. Routine Russian and Chinese drills rolled out in early October. Nothing out of the ordinary, but every maneuver now read as a possible test, a subtle probe for cracks in the alliance shield. In a world where deterrence depends on decision speed, the perception of drift at the top is sometimes all it takes to tempt a rival to press just a little harder. On September 30th, 2025, nearly 800 U.S. generals and admirals, almost the entire General Officer Corps, were called to Quantico for a summit that broke precedent and drew global attention. The event's tone, marked by public threats of mass firings from President Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth, exposed the fragility of a system where 809 senior officers oversee more than 2 million service members and civilians. History shows that sudden purges, whether in the US, Russia, or Turkey, have consistently damaged readiness, morale, and alliance trust. Today, the exact number of resignations or forced retirements from that meeting remains unconfirmed, and many internal deliberations are still classified. What is clear? A politicized command crisis can ripple far beyond Washington, slowing decisions, straining alliances, and signaling vulnerability to adversaries. The stability of U.S. military command remains a linchpin, not just for American defense, but for over 1 billion people who rely on U.S. deterrence worldwide.